Chris Landry, welcome back to T-Town. I hope you're doing well, man.
I'm doing good. How about you?
Oh, we're good. We're very good, very good. And we certainly want to spend some time looking back the way that you look at the game. Alabama, Tennessee, your biggest takeaway from that game?
Well, another impressive performance. I thought they, completely dominated Tennessee from the start, kind of broke their will. And, to me, they're pretty much in every area. I give Tennessee credit. I thought they continued to fight, but, you can see that they really just don't match up. I thought that at the line of scrimmages, I thought we talked about it last week, it was an overwhelming favorite in Alabama's favor, and they really kind of showed that. I think that's where it really stood out to me that Tennessee could not establish or hold the line of scrimmage on either side of the ball, and that really what stood out on top of the overall dominance that they were able to really take apart Tennessee.
If you look at this game, can you see where this offensive line, because we've talked about it for a couple of weeks, just moving Brown in there on that left guard side and Lester Cotton with the injury, it seemed that they were a more physical offensive line. Did you see that?
Well, as I've talked about, when they run the football and they stay committed to it and do that, absolutely, they can be a good run blocking unit. The issue is when you don't run it and you are pass blocking a lot, as I mentioned and talked about that last week, you become less effective at it because you're pass blocking more and more and more. And then when, it's not just like turning on a faucet, you just don't come back and then run block as good. The more you do it, the more you, A, get better at it, and B, the more effect you can have at affecting a defensive front by running the football, which is, the most debilitating thing you can do to a defense is to run the football at them, move them off the football, and completely kind of break their will. And in order to do that, you've got to run it. You've got to run it a lot. This Alabama offense is, been a little bit more in tune towards explosive plays and getting points. I still think that they want to get to the point where they create the explosive plays, and then maybe not taking the foot off the gas, but to just salt the game away. At some point, you've got enough points in the game, pardon the pun, to be able to just control the game and just kind of, decompress the game, if you will. And I think the more they do that, I think you see there's nothing wrong with their ability in terms of run blocking skills to be a good run blocking unit, other than the fact that they pass block a lot more than they normally do, and they play some, not a whole lot of tempo, but some of that is going to be reflected on how they go about getting to the line of scrimmage to the next play and pass blocking. The more you do that, the more you're going to be effective at that, and the less you're going to be effective at run blocking. But I don't see a real issue on the offensive line. Now, they haven't played good defensive front for the most part. We'll see a couple of them down the stretch. But I think, I think they're in pretty good position to be able to cause damage even with the remaining of their schedule.
Let me also ask you, just to kind of, before we tie all this together and really get your thoughts on Alabama LSU, let's go back to LSU Mississippi State. Can you provide some maybe insight into that game?
Well, Mississippi State is so one-dimensional. They cannot throw the football to save their life. And, I think, and it's tough when you're not in there coaching them, you don't know, but I think Joe Moorhead, inheriting a really good team, good defensive team, a quarterback that's experienced, a lot of talk about how good he could be, but Nicky Fitzgerald is just not a good passer. And I think maybe because he came in and didn't want to disrupt something that was successful. Remember, obviously, it was unusual in that most times when you have a coaching change, it's because you're not doing things well. This was the case where things were going well at Mississippi State. And so I don't know that Joe wanted to come in and necessarily, change things. He thought in Nick Fitzgerald, he had a guy that he can really do some things in the passing game with. He figured out that he can't, and I think that when you're one-dimensional against a pretty good defense, which LSU is, it was a disaster waiting to happen. They couldn't get anything done, and they tried to run the football, and it's certainly a little bit of a challenge defending a running quarterback, a mobile quarterback. It requires you to have an extra gap of responsibility to defend that guy, but they just don't have a passing game, and they just loaded the front, and that was the real issue there. So you've got to be against a pretty good defense, which LSU is you've got to be multifaceted. You've got to be able to run. You've got to be able to throw it. LSU doesn't have a great pass rush, a great base pass rush, but they can bring blitz pressure, particularly from the third level, and they've got great cover guys that can man up. On the offensive side, I didn't think LSU was all that impressive. I think that they continue to kind of wear on people a little bit. They stay committed to the run, which I give them credit for because they don't have a lot of ability to score a lot of points. They did run the football well against Georgia. I know you asked about Mississippi State, but just kind of, I thought that they did a pretty good job against Georgia, and against Mississippi State it wasn't quite as easy because Mississippi State's a little bit healthier and, quite frankly, was a little bit better than Georgia at the line of scrimmage, at least when the time they played them. So I think this is still an LSU offense that is pretty average and not any better than that. The defense is good and it's well coached. They were out-coached against Florida, but they certainly out-coached Georgia. There's no question about that. So I think it's a good team. I don't think it's as – I've said this and explained this on my podcast that people talk a lot about where teams are ranked. And I think that's kind of been the history of college football. I don't rank teams. I grade them, and then I rank them. That tells you where there's separation. I don't think there is a fourth-best team in college. I don't think LSU is the fourth-best team if I were to rank them, or fifth-best. But you can take the fourth best and the 18th best and mix them up and put 18 at 4 and 4 at 18, and you pretty much got the same thing. And I think LSU's a good team. Are they better than Michigan or Texas or Oklahoma or Florida or Iowa or any number of teams, A&M? I mean, I think you can debate it either way. I think LSU's a good team. I think they've got elite cover skills in the secondary, and I think they're very well coached on defense by Dave Aranda. And so I think that makes them formidable. Outside of that, I like Joe Burrow as a game manager. I like him as a guy that can make plays with his feet. I don't think he makes a lot of mistakes, which is good, but I don't think he's capable of making a lot of plays either.
Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com, each Tuesday and Thursday with those wonderful podcasts that's available there and all the breakdowns. He does the analysis that he's given us a little appetizer for every Wednesday. It's more comprehensive there. They are able to go into a lot of details and inside information from someone, football views from a coach, a scout, an administrator. Chris, how can LSU keep this game and get it into the second half against Alabama?
I think they're going to have to really do a good job flipping the field with special teams, getting a short field for their offense. I think they're going to have to be patient on offense, try to work the ball, keep the ball away from Alabama's offense. I think that LSU's better on special teams in terms of field goal kicking anyway. I don't think they're better in the return game, but they're pretty solid. If they can get some points early, make Alabama play, one possession game a little bit longer than they normally do. I think the biggest thing that I notice every week when Alabama gets in the game, it's boom, boom. I mean, the game it's a two possession game, 5 minutes into the first quarter, and for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much the game plan is out the door for the opponent. I think that's where I think LSU can, if they play well early and kind of keep the crowd in it, because it's a good crowd, but it's a crowd that will turn on their team very quickly if they get down. I think staying in it early, Ryan, is the key. I think if they're able to create field position, get some early points, maybe cause a turnover, maybe get some mistakes by Alabama early, then it becomes a little bit more competitive, and then we can see a game. I tell everybody, all the time, though, is, it's one of the more unusual things when you look at Alabama is I'm very curious to see what happens with a Tua-led offense that plays 4 quarters. I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if we're ever going to see it this year, if there's ever going to be a need for it. But, that's the thing, too. Alabama has been so good early on that they build a lead that they've never had to play from behind. So if LSU's able to, get a 10-0 lead, how does Alabama respond to it? I think they'll be fine, but they've not had to really do that, really. I mean, we saw them, Ole Miss, they're down 7-0. That was erased virtually immediately, and Ole Miss's defense is not very good. So I think that is the real key for LSU. They've got to stay in the game early. They won't say this, but if they can make this a close game early, then it's obviously common sense that it's got a better chance to be in a closer game going into the half and into the third quarter. Keeping it close with a chance is an advantage that LSU would have if they're able to get it to that point, because I think what you have to first be careful of when you're playing Alabama is don't get run out of the building, your own building, in the first quarter, because then that's where, I think Alabama can come from behind if they ever get from behind. I don't think LSU can come from behind. If LSU gets down, 14, 17 points, they got to work their way back into the game. They're not going to be able to throw it across the lot and do what explosive offenses do. So I think that's the formula for them. That's their only formula, I think.
Does Alabama have to help them to beat Alabama?
Yes, they're going to have to help them a lot. I think it's going to have to be at least a -3 in the turnover margin for Alabama. I think LSU is going to have to be a +3 in the turnovers, get 3 turnovers and not turn the football over themselves. I don't think LSU can beat Alabama. I think Alabama has to make mistakes to allow a game to take place in which we might see something. And, there's always that chance, and you never know how games may go. But foreseeing a significant injury, you're dealing now with the, I wouldn't say that Alabama's quarterbacks are gimpy, but, you wonder a little bit if you go down into a situation where the quarterback gets injured, but then we're seeing something else that we haven't seen. So we're going to have to see something that we've not seen thus far this year. I think Alabama's superior to LSU significantly. And I think that Alabama will have to help the cause, or something has to help to kind of bring the game down into where it's a more competitive state. But it's an environment, at least, that's a tough one. It's Saturday night in Tiger Stadium, so they'll be amped up, they'll be ready. And I don't think that LSU has as much to – everybody's talking about, LSU is, well, could they be a second team? And I think LSU's playing with house money here. Alabama's got the pressure. They're the team to beat. They're the prohibitive favorite to winning the title. I think LSU, if they keep this game close, and it's close in the second half, then they take their chances. I think that if you could give them a truth serum, they take this game into the second half with a chance to win it, and they just take their chances, because I think right now it's just about holding on and not, allowing that team to explode on you.
When you look at Dave Aranda, he solved the Jalen Hurts riddle. Jalen Hurts went there in 2016. Up into that point, really nobody had slowed him down, and that was the game that went down to just the final quarter there in Baton Rouge, 2016 game. Let me ask you, what makes Dave Aranda such a great and probably the best defensive coordinator in this league?
Well, the biggest thing is he's got good players, and they recruit good cover guys, and they've got good talent. There's not. Again, everybody has their moments. Dan Mullen for 2 years in a row at Florida and at Mississippi State outcoached him, and just really just took it to Dave. But what Dave does is he brings pressure from different launch points, and usually second, third level pressures like Grant Delpit will remind folks of Minkah Fitzpatrick. He is going to be a great player at the next level, and he can line up in the slot, he can blitz, he can cover, he can tackle. So when you got that type of player, enough said. They can also match up on the outside. So if there's somebody that has the best chance of matching up against Alabama's speed outside, they maybe can do that better than most people. not schematically, but just talent-wise. Now, the issue is for LSU to play the run, they got to play the run with numbers. They got to put an extra guy into the box. So it's going to be a cat-and-mouse game where, to me, you've got to stop Alabama's run first because they'll do that and they'll run the football until they get the right coverage matchups. Then they'll throw it. So it's going to be a little bit of a cat-and-mouse game, jumping a guy in and out of the box and making sure that, Alabama have to make sure they get into the right play. That's where I think mixing things up is what he does schematically. That's pretty good. But, Ryan, it's like anything else. You've got to have good players to be able to – it's not schemes that win. It's really good talent in a really good scheme that wins. I've seen good talent get ruined by poor scheme and poor coaching and poor development. But Dave coaches his guys hard. He coaches very, very well in terms of how he teaches technique, and he puts guys in a really good position to win. And he'll take a guy that has one or two skill sets, and he'll utilize them there very, very well. Delpit's a great example of a guy that really does a good job. Divinity's a good player. Chase On. And, they've got some good players that can attack you at all three levels in terms of pressures. But they got to manufacture pressure. Now, they don't have the Arden Key type guy, and I know Arden didn't play well last year, was injured, but the pure edge rushers that can win with four-man pressures, they usually need to run some stunts or run some blitz pressure to create pressure. So, but he does it very well, and he's timely, and he'll attack the quarterback. So they'll try to see if they can corral Tua in there and see if they can force him into tight windows and good coverage and see what he can do. That's what their game plan is going to be.
Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com. You can join all 32 NFL teams, 78 major college football programs, and become members of LandryFootball.com. You get all the latest inside information from a guy from the college and NFL programs turned to as a consultant on coaching and scouting matters. For less than a magazine subscription, you can get that film room breakdowns on recruiting, college football, draft, NFL coaching, search matters. Check it out, LandryFootball.com today for our best season membership package ever. Membership options include monthly, 3, 6, 9 months, or yearly. Get access to insights of a veteran coach, a scout, and administrator. All you have to do is tell them that you heard it right here on the game, LandryFootball.com. Hey, Chris, let's move to Georgia and Florida here for a couple of minutes. I want to hear your thoughts on this big game in Jacksonville, Florida.
Well, Florida first. They're very good defensively. They're very aggressive. They've got good pass rushers. They've got good cover guys. I think they're good on all three levels of their defense. Where I've been just so impressed is the job that Dan Mullen has done on the offensive side. I don't think they're overly talented on offense. I think the offensive line is vulnerable. But they have found a way to do two things. They found a way to run the football by formation and getting people vacated out of the run box. Then they've got done a really good job with Felipe Franks and getting him more comfortable where, they're getting the ball out of his hands quickly, and they've made a whole lot of him. I just keep looking think about where Nick Fitzgerald was last year under Dan Mullen and where Felipe Franks was last year under Jimmy Mack and where they are now. I mean, how much Fitz has regressed and how, dare I say, adequate to sometimes good does Felipe Franks look? And I think he's really limited. He's got a elongated delivery, slow to process, but he sped things up for him by creating them good matchups. So I think it's really good coaching, and they've managed to run the football well. Look, they ran the football on LSU. They defended the LSU's run well. They covered them and brought pressures, and hey, they rattled Joe Burrow a lot in that game. So I know what I'm getting with Florida. With Georgia, this is where I'm a little bit perplexed. And I made a mistake because I just looked at Georgia coming into this year, and I looked at the talent, and I was curious to see how good would they be. And I thought they'd be really good. I know they've had problems injury-wise, and I know they're young on defense. But they don't get off blocks or defend the run well. And they've got an elite corner as good as any corner in this league. Offensively, they've got a lot of backs, but they don't run quite as hard or as disciplined or with the vision that Chubb and Michelle did. the quarterback play has regressed a little bit, so passing game is not as dominant. So I am curious to see exactly what Georgia was able to figure out this bye week. They're talented. They're capable. They're overall more talented than Florida, but I can't say that off of how they come into this game that they're the better team. In fact, Florida has been better. But, this is going to be a little bit of a different game. I think that LSU game opened things up. It opened up the wound for Georgia. It exposed some things. How were they able to correct it? You can't correct some of the personnel issues, but you can correct some of the things that I thought that they did. Leveraging the run wasn't very good. They missed gaps. Their run fits were off. Those are things that can be corrected. So I'm very curious to see how much better Georgia is coming off that bye week, because we all know this game is one of the great games in the country, and certainly one of the hallmark games in the South. And I do believe this game will decide the East. I don't think Kentucky can throw the football well enough they're still in it right now, and I don't know if they'll get by Missouri or not this week, but I do think this game will ultimately decide the East. So, this kind of makes it a playoff feel in a regular season atmosphere, which makes college football so great.
Chris, this is probably the most selfish question I've ever asked you on the program, but I just got to know. My Dallas Cowboys picked up Amari Cooper earlier this week.
Yeah.
Does that change them? I mean, they're 3-4, but it's a winnable division. What do you think? I mean, you think Amari Cooper could put them maybe in somewhat of playoff contention? I mean, can we have a little hope here for my Cowboys?
Well, first of all, no one's going to run away with that division. I know the Redskins are playing the best right now, but in that division, but no one is running away. Amari did some really good things early. I thought some of the injuries kind of retarded his progress a little bit. Then for reasons that I'm having a hard time putting my finger on, had some issues with those injuries. Route running wasn't as good. Some drops. And I think this is a byproduct of John Gruden going in and John Gruden wanting to do his thing and his guys. John doesn't have patience. Amari's still a young player. I mean, he's not a rookie, but he's young, and I think he has a chance to be a really good receiver in this league still. I don't know of any attitude or work ethic issues. Certainly that was not the case coming out of college, but, I want to see what they can do. I don't know that schematically how well this Dallas offense will do utilizing him, but I think he's certainly more explosive than any receiver they got. And as you know, as a Cowboy fan, Cole Beasley's been the biggest weapon on offense in the passing game. They've got to get more options, no doubt about it. And I think Amari has a chance to give them some playmaking ability. But, I'm a little bit worried about his consistency or lack thereof and why that took place and why it was a problem. And it may have been a lot to do with Gruden, but we'll find out.
Chris, let me throw it back to you. Talk about the website. Invite people how they can connect with you on Twitter at Landry Football, LandryFootball.com, and invite us to go there and check out that wonderful material.
Well, we appreciate it. As Ryan said, at Landry Football is where you can follow me on Twitter and Facebook, Landry Football. And on the website, LandryFootball.com, is where we take you inside the film room. We do the film room breakdowns of the college and NFL scene. We've got all the breakdowns for this past week. We're getting ready to get all the previews of all these college games this weekend, all the NFL games as well. So we are really starting to put a recruiting notebook every day, and we're going to have series like, for example, we'll take Alabama's recruiting class, which before you know it, we click off the SEC championship game. Will be a couple of weeks, and it'll be early signing day. We'll have a breakdown of all the prospects on each of your team's class. So, for example, Alabama, we'll begin to break those down for you. We've got a lot of the notes in the film room report, so we'll go ahead and provide that for you. So it involves recruiting, the draft, players, teams, coaches, schemes, anything involving the football game at the college and NFL level. We take you inside the film room, give you a coaching and scouting perspective, and as Ryan says, for less than a magazine subscription, you can have your access to your own personnel department, your own scouting department. College teams belong, NFL teams belong. So you can get it for a very, very inexpensive price. You can try it out for a month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever is your favorite. The longer the commitment, the cheaper the price is. So check us out. If you like football, you'll love LandryFootball.com.
Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com. Chris, as always, thank you so much for being a part of the show, man. Have a great weekend. We'll break it down next week even more so. Thank you again for being a part.
Thank you so much. Take care. You bet.